Greetings, all. In this episode, I am sharing some things that you should look out for when choosing an Ifa godparent. So, this question keeps coming up along with like leaving an Ifa godparent. So, I really wanted to discuss these items on the podcast so that you all can get a clearer idea or perspective of what you should be looking out for. Now, I'm only going to focus on four of the things that I consider to be the main objectives. However, I have covered this topic pretty extensively in my latest book, African Spirituality for Beginners. So I have a whole section in there where I go deep into choosing a spiritualist, mentor, guide, diviner, etc. Even so, laying out many things that you should think about before you pretty much grab a hold of somebody, so to speak, as your godparent. And I do want to clarify here. So in the book, I did talk in general about a spiritualist, somebody that you're just approaching to do divination for you, as well as somebody who you go into that deeper connection with. But I do want to state here that what I mean by godparent is somebody that you choose to go through this journey with. This is the person who will most likely initiate you if you choose that process, who will be doing the majority of your spiritual work, your readings, your ritual work, and teaching you about the tradition and helping you integrate into the tradition. I'm not just talking about one-off reading services, or even so you may stick with someone for a while before you transition to someone else and you just decide, hey, I'm going somewhere else, but the other person you may work with that person for years, even so getting readings and things like that. But when you start to receive Ifa pots, so, a hand of Ifa or any type of Orisha icon or what have you, that is a form of initiation. It's not full-blown initiation, but it is a step in the direction of initiation. So when you begin that process, the person who does that for you, or people, because sometimes people do have multiple godparents within the tradition, you at that point should definitely take stock of what direction you're going in, even before that, even with the diviner. But with the godparent, because this particular relationship is more in depth than just getting a reading from someone or something like that, right? So you could maybe compare this to like, you're just dealing with somebody getting readings and so forth, mentoring you, guiding you, as maybe you're kind of dating someone. It could get pretty hot and heavy, but that's like more of a dating scenario or a hookup or something. Whereas an Ifa godparent would be more comparable to a marriage partner, a spouse, or something like that. So implied in the name is parent. This is somebody who is supposed to be your guardian, who is supposed to stick really close to you, lead you and guide you down the path of the tradition, and they are going to be somebody who you should be deeply connected with and you will be deeply involved with, depending on how you approach the tradition. So I want to clarify that so you understand the difference here. Either way, these tips will be helpful regardless of what you choose to do, if it's a godparent or just someone you decide to go and get a reading from. This is typically going to be one of the more harder parts of your journey. I say that all the time because I know it was for me, just finding the right person to fit my needs. And so many other people have this challenge in the diaspora because we come to this late in life oftentimes. And so we're trying to figure everything out. And for some people, it's not so easy. It's just like getting a recommendation from somebody that they know or something like that. This is one of the primary reasons why I do what I do, is because I was asked so many times by people like, do you know someone or what have you? And so I actually started recommending my Baba, and we started to work together in that capacity. So now he provides reading through the Ascending 44 website, and you can definitely reach out to us there and get an Ifa reading. We're more than happy to help you go through this journey. But for the average person that may not have a connection or don't know anybody, that can be very, very difficult. And that was my situation. So I've talked about that before. I don't really want to get into my journey in this episode. Instead, I'm focusing in on some things that I kind of wish I knew when I was going through this process, and some things that not even just from that perspective, but I would say some things that I've also learned working with different people. I do want to start out by saying, though, some things that you need to keep in mind when you go down this path is number one, you're working with someone who also has a life, because sometimes I see it where individuals think that, the Baba, the Iya, what have you, this individual is just, solely there to take care of their spiritual needs, as if the person doesn't have their own life. So an Ifa priest or priestess is not someone who commits to a life of celibacy, right? So typically, most often, they will absolutely have a family, because family dynamics are so very important in Yoruba culture. Therefore, you will most likely deal with someone who, if they don't have a family when you meet them, at some point during their journey, they may end up having one, which means that they have obligations just like the rest of us, right? They're not somewhere sitting in a temple all day just doing readings and just doing ritual work and teaching people and so forth. So they're dealing with their day-to-day life needs, similar to a pastor, an imam, anyone like that who may be over a spiritual system, who has their own life priorities that they need to deal with. Also, the individual is human. They may possess a lot of spiritual know-how, a lot of power, right? Because they understand the spiritual realm at a high level. However, the individual is still human. So keep that in mind. You should treat them with the same level of respect and regard that you would treat anybody else with. And it goes on both ends of the spectrum. So you should treat them with respect in a good way, right? Not disrespecting them and not thinking that, like they're just here for your needs, or you could just disregard them. But you should also, not hold them to a high standard beyond what is commonly human. So that person is going to fall short. They're not going to have it all together in every aspect of their life. Matter of fact, they may be going through some tremendous spiritual battles because they are a spiritualist. So they're going to be attacked quite often. They have to do the same level of spiritual work, if not more in some cases, as the average devotee or practitioner within the Ifa tradition. That's how it goes. So definitely keep those things in mind. Herein, I'm going to get to the first area that I consider to be the most important, which is compatibility. That's the first thing that you need to think about. You know yourself, your needs, your wants, your desires more than anybody else. You need to consider these things when choosing an Ifa godparent. So, of course, none of us really had that choice when it came to our parents, at least not once we got to the physical realm, right? We just came in through whatever portal that had been chosen for us, or we chose, or however you want to think about that, before we left heaven or our room. We came into this experience and we landed here with the people who we call parents. And in some cases, some of us are not even raised by those people. We may be raised by completely different individuals who had nothing to do with us making it here on this earth. Well, of course, with an Ifa godparent, if you're coming into this later in life, if you're listening to this episode, then you most likely have the opportunity to choose that individual, right? The only time it's not really a choice is if you're born into the tradition and you kind of just have to deal with what your parents are dealing with until you get of age and you can make your own selection. But herein, you do need to understand yourself at a deep level. That is one reason why I do compare this to marriage, although you're not married to this person, but you need to think about it kind of in the same way you would approach choosing a partner, a marriage partner, right? This needs to be somebody that you're able to spend a long time with, even so the rest of your life, if that's what you desire for it to be, as far as, your relationship being long term for the rest of your life, the rest of their life. That's typically the situation, right? That you're going to stick with this person for the long haul. So you really need to know yourself. You need to understand your needs. Nobody can figure it out but you. So one of the first things that I oftentimes suggest is to make a list of the things that you must have and the things that, it's okay whether you have them or not, like you would love them, but it's okay if you don't have them. And then also a list of things that you just absolutely cannot tolerate. That's going to be helpful in determining if somebody is okay for you to work with or not. Typically, you're going to be able to assess this as you try to interact with that person and start dealing with them. Sometimes you just know right away, like, no, this is not the person for me. Sometimes it can take a while. Again, it's similar to like a dating experience or what have you. If you're kind of vetting people, you have to figure out who is going to be the best person for you. Like, what are some things that, I just cannot deal with, or what are some things that I absolutely have to have in this relationship? And then take your time as you begin to interact with the person. Try to talk to them as much as you possibly can before you make such a commitment that, yes, I am going to get my, reach your pots, icons, or what have you through this particular individual. Try your best to vet them as much as possible. So again, as much time as you can spend with them, as much questions as you can ask them, so forth and so on, to see if that is the person for you. So the next thing is somebody who can provide you with a high level of guidance. This is something that I deal with quite a bit with a Sunny 44. So I do offer mentorship services, whereby if you have questions about the tradition and you can't find any information anywhere else, you can pay and we can answer your question. We provide really, really thorough answers through that particular service. Everyone who has ever gotten it is like just wow, because they're like, this is exactly what I wanted, and even more so because we try to give you some deep level knowledge because we understand you're not finding that elsewhere. The challenge that I see with that, though, is that sometimes people are coming asking questions that should have been answered from the individual who help them with whatever the situation it was. So sometimes people will get Orisha pots and things like that, and they don't know how to work with them properly. Or they have questions about the pot and they just, I don't know, for whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable with maybe going back to the person who gave it to them or not. My point here is, though we're definitely happy to help anybody who needs that type of service, that's why we offer it. But you should not have to get that from somewhere else. Wherever you are getting your services, you should be able to get that guidance, typically for free if you purchase a service from someone. So if you got a reading, for instance, and you have questions about that reading, you should be able to connect with whoever gave you that reading and get your questions answered. Go back and forth through the process and get that person to answer your questions. And this should not even be like just a one-time thing where, you can only ask questions within 24 hours after we give you the reading, right? Now, definitely, there should be some time limits because we do so on our divination service as well. Because after so long, of course, the Bible will forget like what happened because he's working with so many different people. And even so, after a certain point, the energy has changed. And so even if he were to go back and try to do a reading again on what he initially did a reading on, the outcome may be a little bit different, maybe different sacrifices and offerings that you have to give at that point if you wait too late. That being said, though, you should typically have access to the individual where you can go back and forth and ask questions about any service that you purchase from them, right? Now, with that being said, when it comes to deep level teachings and knowledge, you will probably have to pay for this in some form or fashion. So what this looks like, especially in the Western world, is that most people do charge for those higher level of teachings or knowledge or what have you, because it's difficult, even so impossible in most instances, for somebody to answer those types of questions for you on a regular basis and really thoroughly to get to the nitty-gritty of different aspects of the tradition with one person, because they're servicing so many different people, and of course they need to eat, they need to feed their families, so they can't just sit down with one person. And even so, in a group, if their time isn't being compensated in some form or fashion. Now, some people may do certain teachings online for free, and I'm kind of putting that in quotes, because if they have a platform where they're being monetized to provide this type of knowledge and education, then it's really not free. Like, they're getting paid for it, so they're more than willing to put that information out there for you to consume it for free. But it was paid for maybe by their social media platform, let's say YouTube or Instagram, Facebook, or what have you, that they may be on. Otherwise, they may charge you for courses, which we absolutely do, because we spend a whole lot of time, energy, and effort in developing courses and things like that. So we have to charge for those types of things. But you should never expect someone to sit down and just give you that type of information for free. Even though, again, the scenario may look like you're getting things for free, like when you go to a church or something like that. And a lot of people compare this situation to that. And they're like, why am I paying to learn about this tradition? Well, you do the same thing in a church if you pay tithes. It's just not like directly, well, hey, if you want the knowledge about this, you got to pay XYZ for it in the same way. But you are paying if you're paying tithes and offerings, right? And in today's world, they've gotten much more strict about ensuring that people do that, because they have to keep the church running. The pastor, preacher, teacher, whomever has to get paid for his or her services, because they're providing all types of services all day long. And if they're a part of a large conglomerate, these type of mega churches or what have you, there are funnels. These people are salaried, right? So they are getting paid for their services. Again, it may seem like it's free for you because you're not paying one for one, but you are paying when you're dealing with giving tithes and offerings and things like that. Even so, buying their books and their courses, because some of them also sell things like that as well. So there is a way that some money has to be exchanged in order for that person to continuously live their life, right? And of course, that happens with Ifa, with divination, ritual work. But, again, education. Because if the priest or the priestess is spending all their time doing that type of stuff, they definitely can't sit with someone all day, teach and give them information. So my point here is, either way it goes, there should be some type of pipeline for you to get guidance from that individual, right? And if they're going to be your godparent, I'm actually going to go a step further and say, hey, you need to have some kind of number or email address, or even Facebook DM, whatever it may be, where you can connect with that person and communicate with them about any services that you have paid for. If they are not providing that, if they're even so much as asking you for extra money to give you guidance about something that they've already performed for you, then I would absolutely caution you there and say, maybe take a step back and find someone who isn't, charging astronomical fees for that type of thing. But when it comes to the educational component, you will most likely have to pay for those types of things. Another thing to consider is accessibility, which goes along with that guidance piece that I just spoke about. So you should be able to at least make appointments with the person. It's definitely okay and normal for you to maybe have to schedule an appointment with them. But if they're your godparent, you should be able to schedule appointments with them whenever you need it on like a regular basis. And you should absolutely have access to them when you're dealing with maybe an urgent or an emergency situation. So, again, maybe a telephone number, email address, or DM, and you should get a response within a reasonable amount of time whenever you're working with that particular individual. That is so very, very paramount. No matter where they are located, you should be able to connect with them and commune with them. Otherwise, that's not going to be the best of relationships for you. Just like, for instance, if you were dealing with a spouse, right? You're dealing with a mate. Even if you guys have to live apart for a while or even long term, you need to be able to communicate with each other, especially in emergency situations, but even so on a regular basis. So now the last thing is the quality of their work. When you are dealing with a godparent, they need to be providing you with a service that is beneficial to you. And the only way you know that is if the ritual work and the things like that is actually working. That's why you may want to spend some time with this individual, a year or two or plus in some cases, before you decide to initiate unto them, because you want to make sure that the work that they are doing is actually working. Anybody can play the role or the game if you don't know what they're supposed to be doing, right? And so you need to take that time out when they start to do ritual work for you. So, give it a few months or longer, just depending on the nature of the work and what you need to happen in that particular situation, and see how you're feeling and how things go after you get ritual services performed through them. All right. Because they could be the most knowledgeable person in the world about the tradition, which is great. They could provide you with excellent information there. You could be very compatible with their personality. They could be so accessible to you and just so many other things. But if what they're doing for you from a ritualistic perspective isn't working, then it's really no need for you to travel down that road with that particular individual. And I say that also in a space of knowing that, somebody could actually be a really good spiritualist, but maybe what they do for you the first time or the second time is not working. There could be other reasons behind that aside from the work that they're doing, right? It could be something on your end. So definitely take your time with that component, because there are definitely times where you will probably have to get several things done in order to remedy a problem. I know that has been the case for me. Like, the first ritual doesn't clear everything up. It may just be a starting point where that ritual was done to kind of remove some blockages and negativities from my path, and maybe to open up a door. But then I might need to do some additional ritual work in order to allow those blessings and the things that I need, the positive aspects, to really flow into my life, right? I've seen that on so many different occasions, not just with Ifa, with the Vodou. It's just common that, sometimes you may have to do multiple layers of work. But if you've been working with a person for years and years and years and years on end, and they're not providing you with any quality work, you just, spending your money and your life isn't advancing in the direction that you needed to advance in based on the work that they're doing for you, then you definitely need to consider going into a relationship with them, as far as them being your godparent or something like that. So definitely take your time, because the quality of their work matters. All right. So those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about here that you should definitely look at when it comes to considering who you choose for an Ifa godparent. In the next episode of The Path of Ifa, I'm going to dig into leaving the Ifa godparent relationship, because I get questions about that as well. So I really wanted to dig into that topic, because there are many things that you need to consider before you sever that type of connection, that type of relationship. And I want you guys to hear that again, because that can help you even if you haven't made such a connection. It can also give you deeper insight into what you should be looking for before you go into that type of connection. So that way you may be able to even so avoid having to sever those types of ties. Either way it goes, guys, stay tuned, stay with me, because we have a lot of excellent things coming up in the near future. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close up here. Ashe, please have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond.